Well, thank you, Mayor. You know, I want to say that having leadership support this work is so important because it's often, relegated to a nice to have. And for you to speak so powerfully about how important connection to nature is to making Madison a vibrant community just puts wind in all of our sails. So thank you very, very much. I'm trying to get my notes up here. 1 second. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Milligan Toffler, and I am the president and CEO of the Children in Nature Network. And I also just want to welcome you to Madison and to this gathering. And it just brings me such joy to see people who are working so hard every day to advance connection to nature for kids and families have an opportunity to come and, hopefully fill your bucket, right? Connect with colleagues, get inspired to go back and do the important work that you're doing. As you heard, Madison is a Nature Everywhere community, and there's a whole process for doing that. But we're excited to announce today that we're starting a new opportunity that is called the Nature Everywhere Action Challenge, which any community can sign up. There's a link on our website, and you can sign up to form a team, as the mayor described. It really, bring a cross-sector group together to use the tools and resources and access to the networks that we provide at the Children in Nature Network to advance nature everywhere in your community. So I really hope you'll take the opportunity to check that out on our website and to consider, if you're not already part of the Nature Everywhere accelerator group, that you consider becoming a Nature Everywhere Challenge community. And to provide some inspiration for you to think about that, I'm really thrilled and excited to introduce our panel, which is a group of leaders who have been doing this work as they've been doing here in Madison for many years, just to share their experiences, their stories, the pitfalls, all of the things that will hopefully help inspire you to continue this work. And to kick us off, I'm going to introduce my colleague and friend, Robert Blaine, who is the Senior Executive. You got me on your title again, Robert. He is the Senior Executive and Director at the Center for Leadership, Education, Advancement, and Development at the National League of Cities. And I should have mentioned that we do this work in partnership nationally with the National League of Cities. We've been in partnership with them for the last 10 years, and more recently with the wonderful people at Kaboom. And so Robert will tell you a little bit more about our work together. So Robert.
I always joke with Sarah that my title is so long because I do so little. But it is an absolute pleasure to be with you today. This is my first time in Madison, and it is the most beautiful, beautiful community. I have just loved the few hours that I've been here for so far, but I can't wait to spend more time here. My name is Robert Blaine. I'm a senior executive at the National League of Cities, and I'm here representing the National League of Cities. We are, as of this year, a 100-year-old organization. This is our centennial year, and we support, thank you. We support over 19,000 cities, towns, and villages across the country. We proceed with the conviction that municipal government has a key role to play in caring for the health and well-being of children and for the planet. Our close partners, Kaboom and the Children in Nature Network, hold the same conviction. Together, we seek to ensure children across the U.S. have the opportunity to grow and thrive in supportive communities through proven strategies to increase equitable access to nature everywhere children live, learn, and play, regardless of zip code. This partnership builds on nearly 10 years of co-leadership of cities connecting children to nature and consistent support from the JPB's Foundation. To date, CCCN has provided technical assistance, training, resources, and grants to more than 50 U.S. cities, and in combination with the new Nature Everywhere initiative, will reach at least 50 more. Today, we will hear from leaders from 3 cities that are making big strides to center equity, engage city leadership and community partners, and find systemic ways to respond to challenges facing youth and communities. I hardly need to remind you that these challenges include increased incidence of mental health challenges, decreased levels of physical activity, sagging academic performance, unsafe neighborhood conditions, and the many looming threats related to climate change. But this is a good news story today. Let's dive in to hear more about their approaches. Please join me in welcoming our 3 panelists to the stage. Daniele Lyman-Torres, Senior Executive and Director of Bivona Child Advocacy. Ashleigh Cibelli-Pettus, Conservation Program Coordinator for the City of Austin, and Phil Ginsburg, General Manager, San Francisco Recreation and Parks Department. Please join me in welcoming them one more time. It is a pleasure to have such an august panel of experts, and I'm going to start with a few questions. Ashleigh, I'm going to start with you first. Connecting children to nature more equitably looks a little different in every city. NLC, in partnership with Kaboom and Connecting Children to Nature, is helping cities map baseline inequities that affect children's access to parks, trees, waterways, and other nearby natural features. I invite each of you to talk about the nature connection equity issues in your city, but Ashleigh, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Hey, all. How's everyone doing? Staying warm. I'm up here freezing. No worries. So when you think about, in the city of Austin, nature connection equity issues, I have to look at Austin as a whole, right? We look at our east side and our west side of Austin, and looking at the different parts of the city. West side, more affluent, larger tree canopy, more access to green spaces, more access to parks, more money going into that side. And the east side, different disparities, lower tree canopy, higher heat index, lack of parks, and access to green spaces for our communities and our young folks. And in the city of Austin, CCCN is doing wonderful initiatives and strategies to combat some of these inequities on the east side, like our Green School Parks program, where it provides schools, but not only schools, surrounding communities, access to green spaces and opportunity to learn and play and live in these green spaces. And we talk about east side versus west side. There's actually a really great TED talk that I just listened to by Stephen DeBerry about the wrong side of the tracks and how a lot of different communities across the state and that disparity between those sides, which is another talk for another day. But with my work and my lens through nature connection and equity issues, I really focus on the lack of connection to nature-based careers with young adults, right? I work with youth leadership development for our young adults 16 to 24, and basically breaking down those barriers and walls to join and have a successful career in these nature-based jobs. As time goes on, we see more ethnic minorities in leadership roles in environmental organizations, but it's still not enough. And my thought process is like, why is this happening? You know, are these opportunities here? And if they are here, why aren't our young BIPOC youth accessing these careers? You know, why aren't they seeing the representation that, you know, we see every single day? And how can I be that person? You know, me myself, I'm an inner city kid, born and raised in the Bronx, New York. And woo, I heard a woo, yeah, woo. And I could have never imagined myself being in a career in nature. And I think about it today, and I'm like, you know, was I outside? I was outside all the time. So I was like, yeah, I was outside, you know, but, you know, you don't have that typical connection to nature, you know, playing in streams and climbing trees and, you know, rolling around the grass, you know, things that I've heard. I was outside on the sidewalk, wondering why it was still hot when it was 9 p.m. when the sun went down, and we're just like, still just heat everywhere. Until, you know, I learned about, you know, urban heat index, and then, you know, I never imagined myself as a leader in an environmental movement, let alone an arborist. I am also an arborist, and I learned my passion and like fell in love with trees and tree biology and tree health and tree care, and then noticed in the streets of New York City there are so many trees, and I kind of just made it my priority to be like, you know, I need to tell, you know, the same youth that grew up in my situation that they are actually outside in nature every single day. They have access to nature. It look different, but there is still access to them. And through my work with CCCN Youth Leadership Development and our Eagles Emerging Green Leaders strategy, that's what we imagine. We imagine an Austin where our young people can access careers in the outdoors and be representatives of their own communities, and, you know, be a person that other youth can see. And we have come across so many different barriers, especially working with our young adults. You know, we have lack of representation, degree restraints. You know, not everyone goes straight to college after high school. We have pay constraints, labor equity, or just lack of knowledge and opportunities or networking with people to get into these environmental jobs and these spaces. We've had issues from documentation for our young adults to get a paycheck, right? You know, you need a social security number to receive pay. So through these barriers that we have faced, we've thought of innovative ways to work through these. So, you know, all that to say, you know, providing these opportunities for our young adults to nature-based careers to see more representation in these environmental organizations is a pathway to provide a more equitable lens into nature.
Great, thank you. Danielle, how are you seeing the connection with equity issues in Rochester?
Okay, I guess it started on. Okay. Never give me a hot mic, by the way, before it's my time. I say stuff. Especially to Phil. First, shout out to Rochester. Rochester in the house. Come on, I hear you over there. I see you. I look at this, you know, a little differently from that lens, the lens of our city. You know, Rochester is a city of dichotomies. The haves and the have-nots. You know, a history of luxury from the days of Eastman Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch & Lomb. And for some of you younger folks, those were big companies at one time. Getting old now. And you know, from all of that luxury to now having nearly half of our city's children live in poverty. We rank second in the nation for child poverty. We have beautiful Olmsted parks not one, but many, nestled into huge concrete jungles of dilapidated Kodak buildings and asphalt everywhere, even in some of these parks. Redlining and suburban flight hit our city hard. And much like other Rust Belt cities across the country, we've tried to bring attention to this issue, the inequities and the environment that our children are growing up, and we've tried to bring that up in a variety of ways over the years, but most focused on finding and creating safe play opportunities, but no real initiatives that have made the kind of impact that our partnership with the National League of Cities and being part of the Cities Connecting Children to Nature initiative have. So when we think about our inequities, we're still very much enroped in them, and we look at the lens of our physical space. We know that nature is everywhere, and that's not all about that from an equity standpoint, but from where we sit and where we live, it is. It is very much about the environment around us, the ability to access it safely, the ability to want to be in it, not only for safety, but comfort. Just this sense of not belonging, this mesh of people and place and space, just haven't seemed to go together in a very long time in our community. So, really participating in this and being a part of this was something that was critical. And so when y'all told me no at first, they did. They told me no. I said, you've been mistaken. You made a mistake. You just don't know how important it is for us to break down these barriers in our community for the future of our region and for the future of our children. So grateful that that was responded to. But that's the lens from an equity standpoint that we look at our participation in this.
Great, thank you. Phil, what about San Francisco?
Are we on? Yeah. Hey, thanks, Robert. Good morning, everyone. Just looking out at this crowd, and I'm a recent board member to the Children in Nature Network. This is really exciting. It feels like this is getting sticky, this theme. So it's great to see so many people here, to see so many people working on this issue, to see so many people willing to kind of share and engage what is a absolute fundamental right for kids, which is access to nature. So I guess the question, or the premise of the question, Robert, was that nature access looks different in every city. Mm-hmm. That is true, but you're going to hear, you've already heard some similar themes, and I'm going to join in and tell you a little bit about San Francisco's story. San Francisco is probably known around the country and around the world as a very wealthy city. But like Rochester, like Austin, we have a history of structural and institutional racism and how we have delivered services to the public over generations, and frankly, within our own internal policies and practices in our own park system. We know that San Francisco is blessed with a lot of open space for a very dense city. It ain't nothing like Madison. But we have about 800,000 people crammed into 49 square miles. And through a lot of actually smart decisions over generations, about 20% of our land is green space. It's not quite 30 by 30, but we're doing all right. However, some neighborhoods have access to lots of it. For those of you who know the Bay Area, our northern waterfront, where you see the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz and Crissy Field but there's a different story on our southern waterfront. And in the Tenderloin and in Chinatown, where some of our lowest income families live. In the Bayview in particular, which has the highest concentration of children of any neighborhood in San Francisco. For generations, San Franciscans made decisions to put shit in that neighborhood that nobody else wanted. So that's where we have our sewer treatment plant. That's where we have our power plant. That's a neighborhood that was choked by not one freeway, but by two. And so these issues are real. So I think this first question, before talking about what San Francisco is doing, is really thinking about how you diagnose them, right? And there's a saying from a colleague, some of you may know, who worked for spent a lot of time working for the Trust for Public Land, Peter Harnick. He said, in parks, if you don't count, you don't count. And so in 2016, we in San Francisco developed what at the time, and a lot of folks are doing this now, was a pretty cutting edge set of equity metrics, which we were able to evaluate our park system. And they broke our park system into parks within census tracts, and then census tracts within neighborhoods. And we looked at vulnerable population characteristics and environmental justice data in all of those census tracts, and we developed something called equity zones. And we have a map. There might be a slide floating around here today with some of our work on that topic. And there was really maybe not as much of a surprise but the data validated where people are struggling the most. And what are some of those vulnerable population characteristics? Low income, low birth rate, high asthma rate, unemployment, low education rate, housing insecurity. I think there's one where English is not your first language. Race. They're pretty straightforward. And that has enabled us to make comparisons. So what have we been able to do since then is we've been able to prioritize investment and programming decisions and where we direct volunteers into our equity zones. So we have spent more than 60% of our capital dollars since 2016, well over $250 million, in our equity zones, which only make up 20% of our park acreage, right? So we're spending the majority of our money now in the most vulnerable but smallest percentage of our parks, which I think is a really healthy thing. In 2017, San Francisco became I like to brag about this one. This is my one free brag. We were the first city in the country where 100% of our residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. I'm in the chair as the parks director, so I get to maybe take credit, but these are decisions that were made over 100 and I also get blamed for a lot of stuff I didn't do, but so I can take credit for some stuff. But these were decisions that were made over 150 years, so we have good access, and now we have to raise quality and make sure, I think the mayor said it's one thing to have a park, it's another thing for people to actually use it and feel like it's relevant and speaks to them. So that's just a little bit about our equity work, and I'll dive into our children and nature story maybe in a subsequent question round.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Phil. Each of you here is positioned in or has been positioned within city government. What role do you believe city government plays in leading around connections to nature for children, and how does this show up alongside grassroots efforts? Daniele, you've been both city and community, you have both city and community leadership experience. Will you get us started in reflecting on each of those roles and what it means to your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started in this work of, equity and nature for children, I was the Commissioner of Recreation and Human Services for the City of Rochester. And that's an interesting portfolio of all of the things. Not just Parks and Rec, but Human Services, and that's why I have gray hair and retired. But my community work now. But in talking about it in the context of the city, what was really important about seizing in that moment is that the city sets the stage, the infrastructure, the opportunity. Comes from government, municipal government. Community organizations, they go on to operationalize, implement, program, fundraise, engage, and create community in a way that government can't ever do. And so it's the perfect marriage of a public-private relationship to be able to bring this together. Cities have the parkland, the capital power, the ability to adopt policy and laws. And, that's combined with the connection to community that we can make and work to make sure that this work stays and not just become another mayor's initiative that doesn't survive the next mayor or 10 years from now. But community organizations really can become the anchor. While cities bring that infrastructure, community organizations can become the anchor and reach to make sure that there's real long-standing transformation and in that it gets into the roots of the community to the people, where then the people then own and continue not only the work, but continue to demand investment from the municipal bodies and government into the infrastructure and say, we built this, we need to keep this, we want this, we demand this. So it's a perfect marriage, and the struggle really becomes when one doesn't want to let go of the other, right? Mm-hmm. And so it really has to be a big blend. So it can't be the municipal body saying, we own this and we're going to own it forever. Because the reality is government wasn't built to do that. And people have got to really build those strong ties with community-based organizations that can forward the work and continue the work, and to be a good accountability partner, to one another as we move these kinds of things forward. So from my perspective in sitting in both worlds, I see how very important and how equally important both sides are, and how critical it is for us to forge those relationships and make sure that this is a place and space in this work where whether you're with government or with a community-based organization doesn't matter. Like, people don't even know that sitting out in the room. The work is the work for the community. But up at the higher levels, it is important to have those distinctions between the capital and the ownership of things, so that you can have things go on, hopefully, I hope, into perpetuity. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ashleigh, could you talk about what that's meant in Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about the connection city government should play, myself, I haven't been in city government that long. I've been in government for about 2.5 years now, coming from a nonprofit background. So it has been a learning experience for me to understand, the bureaucracy and the red tape of a city. And, oh my goodness, and the accessibility to certain things. I'm still in my journey, but just like Daniele was saying, we are here to set the stage, right? And in the city of Austin, and the work that we do, particularly for careers for our young adults, looking at, starting from the bottom, looking at job descriptions that, getting into the city and getting into roles and careers, and what those look like and what we can do to advocate to change or open up certain barriers that don't allow people to apply for city jobs. We use youth voice to encourage higher ups to understand where they're coming from and their perspective, and why it's so intimidating even to apply for a city job or to be a voice in a city council or a general meeting. So really, that connection between community and the city is important, and just opening up that door for that connection too. Coming from a nonprofit background, it was very easy to get my grant and do these things for this grant. In the city, it's where is that money going? What are you doing with this? I need every cent accounted for. Is this a part of the strategic action plan? Mm-hmm. And I'm just yep, everything is aligned. We got this. This is totally fine. But really working, not such in a linear pathway, but finding different avenues to achieve, the real purpose of, why we have a strategic equity plan. Like, how are we implementing equity in the city? Yes, you can write all these goals and these actions, but how are you actually doing it? And are the plans allowing us to actually achieve those goals, right? So, we work hard to achieve those equity goals and to see the outcomes. And it might be on a small scale now, but 5, 10, 20 years from now, our small actions will benefit the city in the long run, I believe.
That's great. Thank you. Phil, Ashleigh and Daniele described a kind of what I would call nested civic infrastructure and a connection to government. I'm interested in a city like San Francisco, what that looks like. So,
all right. Well, I'm the crusty bureaucrat in the bunch. 20. That's right. That's why I'm in the middle. Daniele says, 24 years working for the city and county of San Francisco. The last 15 in parks, and it is a bureaucracy. There may have been a time when government either thought it should or it could take care of things for people. But as we sit here today in 2024, I think we all know that government can't and shouldn't do it alone. Government has to be. I think government can be a convener. Government can be a funder. Government is often a land manager in our context. But government must engage outside of itself. It must engage in the private sector. It must engage in the nonprofit community. It must engage with funders. It must engage with kids. It just must engage. And so this is the beginning of me singing the praises for the journey that we're all on, led by the Children in Nature Network and the Nature Everywhere Initiative, along with Kaboom and the National League of Cities, is to basically show government the light and the importance of collaboration. So with Ashleigh's city and with Madison, Wisconsin, in fact, with Austin, Madison, Grand Rapids, St. Paul, we were in the initial Nature Everywhere cohort, back then called Cities Connecting Children to Nature, and very shrewdly we decided to eliminate some words. And for us, and I had a very similar story to Daniele, because we both applied to this program because San Francisco had started an outdoor Bill of Rights for kids, which was a pretty cool thing, and that sort of evolved into us wanting to grow sort of a movement within San Francisco to create more nature access for kids. And our city also applied to be in this cohort, and I think at first we got a ding letter too. But Daniele and I, maybe the reason we're up here is we don't like the word no, and we're kind of pushy. So we ended up in the first cohort with these other fabulous cities. But to be in the cohort, it couldn't just be parks. The cohort required, Robert, remember, it required a representative from the mayor's office. It required a representative from the school district, a representative from the parks department, and a representative from the nonprofit sector. That was very thoughtful and intentional. So right out of the gate, the idea here was, hey, government, it doesn't matter how long you've been there, Phil, you can't do this by yourself. And through those workshops, we launched San Francisco Children in Nature, which is now in its 7th year. And we have, thank you. We have over 40 participating organizations. Many nonprofits, We have a variety of city agencies. We have the federal park system, California state park system. We have obviously the school district. We have our Academy of Sciences. We have museums. This has really become a thing, and we've all the YMCA is a key partner in our model. And through it all, we've been able to leverage each other's strengths. Government doesn't always have the ability to go deep. It has to go wide. So we've been able to collect more youth voices, to Ashleigh's point. We have been able to cultivate stronger and deeper and richer cultural competencies in certain communities through partnership. We've been able to leverage funding through partnership. I think I'm looking at Jen DeMello. And so we also have Kaboom coming on board as one of our, we are partnering with too to build nature exploration areas. But in those 7 years, we actually really have been able to do a lot. And I think this bleeds maybe into the third question. We have focused on, together we made a decision to focus on early childhood education, and we've converted, well, by the end of this year, we will have converted 35 early childhood education facilities, many of which are low-income and working families that have a little preschool in a basement or that goes into the backyard. If you've ever seen like one of those like home makeover shows on Bravo, we have converted 35 different locations into these natural paradises, which is something that we're super proud of, being able to introduce nature to kids that otherwise, like Ashleigh growing up in the Bronx, may not have instinctively or easily gotten it. And even though we're a park-rich city where people can get to a park within 10 minutes, if you've ever tried to walk a toddler 10 minutes, let alone 30 toddlers, it's a really hard thing to do. So we're bringing nature to these communities rather than making these communities come to nature. So what I would say in answer to your question, and I'll save some of the accomplishments or what we've done, I'll save more of that a little bit later for another question. But I would say that we have really, as government, really kind of leaned into the sort of collaborative, collective impact type model. Yeah. And I think that's fundamental to our success.
I love that, and I want to hold on to this collaborative impact model that you're talking about. One of the challenges in communities is that you've got to have someone who holds the leadership responsibility for this kind of work. And Phil, I know that in San Francisco, you've built dedicated staff positions around focusing on what a difference, or actually thinking about what this role looks like. And so could you talk a little bit about what a difference having dedicated staff to do this kind of work is? And I'm particularly excited about how you were talking about San Francisco's transformation of public spaces and early child care centers to support nature play.
Yeah, so this is where I get to brag a little bit about the work that we've done over these last 7 years, and brag a little bit about someone who's been really, really responsible for helping us pull it off. So we came back from Austin in 2016, all fired up, but the folks that went to Austin were the heads, very high level people with a lot of other responsibilities beyond this initiative. And we came back to San Francisco, and as excited and as passionate as we were, immediately stuff started to kind of fade just a little bit, because this isn't the only thing that I work on. I love this stuff, but it's not the only thing that I work on. Nor is this the only thing that Hydra Mendoza, who's a school board member for the San Francisco Unified School District, works on. And it wasn't the only thing that Jenny Lamb, who's in the mayor's office, works on, or Jamie Bruning-Miles, who's the head of all the Bay Area YMCAs. So we realized very quickly that if we were going to do this seriously, we needed to create a governance structure, and then we needed to actually make the commitment and hire someone to actually run this for us. And that was one of my agency's in-kind. We've give, get, or sweat, right? So this was an in-kind commitment that the Recreation and Park Department made to this initiative, which is we used our very precious and scarce budget resources to hire a coordinator of this effort. And even though this person who is here, Maria Durana, will you please stand up? Where are you? She's in the back over there, nice and humble. She will be presenting later about, I think, actually about reading in parks or nature and libraries, which is really cool. We have representatives from our San Francisco Public Library here, so we're San Francisco's in the house. We hired Maria, and we developed a job description, very competitive process, and honestly, the capacity that Maria has given us is just really extraordinary. We set out on creating a strategic plan. Well, first of all, there's just convening. If you're going to have 40 participating organizations, how are you going to convene 40 different organizations? I mean, if it were left to me and my technology skills, we'd still be working on the first meeting. Maria has been a convener. Maria has done budget planning. Maria has done event planning. Maria has done project management of construction projects. Maria has done data capture, data analysis, and tracking. Maria has drafted annual reports. She is sort of our photographer of all our initiatives. She's helped shape early childhood educator nature-based curriculum. I mean, it's really remarkable. So much so that next year, Maria is getting staff. That's a big development. Which, if Maria's happy, I'm happy, and Maria wasn't going to be happy much longer without some staff. But we have an executive committee that has representatives, and you can tell me when to shut up, Robert. Or Daniele always tells me to shut up, so that's fine too. Just hit me. We have 5 core partners now. We have a school district representative, a mayor's office representative, parks representative, nonprofit representative, and we recently brought on the head of our Academy of Sciences, who some of you may know, Scott Sampson, who's written books about nature access and is very intellectually committed to the cause. Then we have a steering committee with, and the head of the Presidio, our national park system. And then we have a whole nother layer of leadership called we have a steering committee that's a whole nother layer of leadership. And then there are sort of subject matter committees that work on different things. We actually put together how to build a nature exploration area handbook about literally how to build NEAs, how to provide nature in a box toolkits. So there's been a lot of documentation, and the results are pretty extraordinary. In addition to this partnership with we have a partnership with the Low Income Investment Fund to do these early childhood educations. We're working very closely with Kaboom to convert. We're shifting, and I know there's a lot of playground companies here, and thank you for leaning in to the conversation and starting to think about how we shift design into more of a nature-focused world. But we are working with Kaboom in some of our larger sites to build 5 new nature exploration areas. We have, and by the way, when we do our own nature exploration areas, we have repurposed, I think this really cool stat, over 2,000 logs and stumps from San Francisco's parks into those nature exploration areas. We've touched 13,000 kids in our city with nature programming, over 5,000 of them preschoolers. We have increased nature exploration program access by 30%. There are my point being is there are some real deliverables here. We've taken this training that we got, that many of you have gotten or that many of you will be getting, and we've launched, but you have to staff up or it just is talk at some point.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Ashleigh, Austin is pursuing multiple strategies to advance equitable access to nature, including green schoolyards, early childhood nature connection, partnering with libraries, and youth leadership development. As you've been deeply involved in this last strategy focused on the leadership of young adults, what are you most proud of as it relates to this strategy, and how does youth leadership interface with the other strategies?
Yeah. What I'm most proud of, you can just take a look at the picture, all of our great youth participants, and really my team in our youth leadership development. I couldn't do anything without community and our committee, Kirsten and Sheridan and Alondra. We actually have Brolin and Harvey who joined our team too, our youth leadership development team, which is a mix of young voices and older voices, to really look at this strategy and look at different ways we can open the doors to some of those barriers I mentioned before, and collaboration effort, just listening to Phil and talk about, staffing and collaboration, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just me and a few others, and we're all in different departments. We're not all in the same department too, so it's actually like cross-departmental collaboration. A lot of my colleagues are here now, Yasmin and Melody and Colleen and Brittany and Sarah and all these folks that we all work together to make these strategies happen. And we're not all in one department, but we're in multiple to put all of our resources together to achieve these things. So I'm most proud about creating opportunities and opening up silos and opening up doors and walls for us to get together, to work together, to make a greater impact. Because that's what it's about. You can't work by yourself. You have to work with others. And that's just in the city. We open up our doors to work with communities, nonprofits. A lot of our youth leadership work, we work with local nonprofits that also hold internships for youth. So literally bringing all these people into a room, all these program facilitators into a room, and we all discuss how we can create pathways, create these pathways. I have a 6-year-old who's interested in water quality, and where can they start? Well, they can start here for a year and get paid, and then their next year they can start here. And creating these opportunities, especially these employment opportunities that are not all educational based, but experience-based, and having that experience to be in a leadership role later, and providing leadership guidance. We had a Green Career Fest where we hosted local internships and groups, and it was more of a, you go to these large career fest and you just give out your resume, but it was a more intimate occasion where our young folks can talk to these employers, apply for a job right on the spot, and get an interview date. But not only having that, having resources, we had a clothing shop on the side with professional clothing for our young folks that might not have accessible access to clothes, right? You think about things like that, and some of the barriers that our young adults face. So I'm most proud of just doing these things and opening these doors and working with people who want to do the same work that I do, and helping me create that work. CCCN strategies were here before I was here, and I got into the city and learned about these strategies. And if you want to know a lot more about all the achievements, go to Melody's session, because I know she is talking, and Yasmin, about all the great initiatives of green school parks and nature smart libraries, and nature play spaces. A way we intertwine our strategies with our youth leadership group. Interns that are working in different fields work to do data collection in our nature play areas about wood degradation, right? So we are constantly intertwining these strategies with work opportunities, paid work opportunities for our youth, to continue these efforts. And just to mention the last picture we had in our Green Career Fest, Beatrice Wilson, who is Assistant Director of U.S. Forest Service And she actually did an opening for a Green Career Fest, just, having that face of leadership, as a Black woman, a powerful Black woman who's in the environmental field, to give hope and opportunity to a lot of our young folks to set that stage, as you say, to get into these pathways and partnerships. I think that's what I'm most proud of.
Beautiful, beautiful. Daniele, during your time as Parks Commissioner in Rochester, you led the way in securing capital dollars for an urban nature center. And you and your team set a citywide vision for children through development of a Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. Share with us how you landed on these approaches and how you made such big strides in such a short amount of time.
Well, we learned a lot about we learned a lot from participating in the city's Connecting Children to Nature cohort, which is why it was so important we be a part of it. We were inspired by what other cities had done, and it really starts. On the screen now is a bunch of the partners and collaborators that we brought together, but that was after our inspiration. But as you can see, we were very fortunate to have a community of all kinds of different stakeholder groups that were ready to be a part of this when we came back from that and had this vision and we were able to convene all of these folks and share that vision. But I want to say that it started with coming to the cohort and doing what you're doing now, which is listening and learning and being inspired by what other people had done. First we were kind of I was inspired by this concept of an urban nature center. And you see the schematic on the screen of an aerial of it. And I was inspired by it. And I came back from our first session, and I was in the mayor's office, and she said to all there's 3 commissioners in the city, and she said to me, hey, if you guys had, some more money, like what's a dream project or whatever. And I talked about an urban nature center, and I want you to know my colleagues laughed at me. But it would be the last time they laughed at me, I'll tell you that. I'm the only woman in the room other than the mayor, but they laughed at me, and I was like, oh, okay, challenge accepted. We will have a nature center. Started to look at, where could this be? And, I talked about our Olmsted parks. Well, we had this beautiful park. We have a beautiful park that is across from where Eastman Kodak had a lot of, industrial setting, and they had taken a lot of land and made it asphalt for parking lots for cars that no longer come to work there. And there was a recreation center, which is in the middle of this picture. And that recreation center had been built in 1945 and had all kinds of amenities outside for the community. But during the time of, white suburban flight and the changing of the neighborhoods, a lot of public amenities were lost instead of, people decided to end them instead of integrate. And so this was one of those centers that went from this vibrant space that had a beautiful pond outside that used to become an ice skating rink and all these other things, and became a place where we stored police motorcycles and sometimes held some trainings. And then also our public works people dumped leaves and crap in the parking lot, piling them up. That's what we did in this beautiful park. And I said, well, that's mine. I want it back. Get your motorcycles, get your stuff out, find somewhere else for the leaves, because we're turning this into a nature center. And they're like, haha, get some money. I was like, I will. But first, to get that money, I came back to thinking about what we were inspired by in these cohorts. And we were very inspired by San Francisco, Maria mostly, not Phil. Sorry, but I mean, Maria was there. So we were inspired a lot by the Children Outdoor Bill of Rights that you had done, in other cities too, Baltimore, other cities we looked at theirs. Especially because when we needed to tailor that to our own community. So you get inspired while you're here, but you do have to go back and tailor that to your own community. So we were inspired, but yours had hearts on it and stuff. Was very West Coast. If I had taken that back to New York, they'd have been like, we ain't doing that. We're not loving things and hugging things. So we had to make it our own, and we did that with those partners that I had up before and the youth. the youth. The youth is what it's about. You see that in this picture. The youth are the ones that presented it to City Council. But I'll talk about that. And that's really how we ended up getting the money, is through not only having this vision that we were inspired by, we were supported with tools and resources and technical assistance to bring together all of those groups, to get organized, to have a process and a timeline. We were fortunate enough to have leaders and staff on our team, many who are here, who were already invested in the groups in the community that we needed to bring to the table. We had the opportunity to use some of the pass-through funds to start an urban ecology workforce development program for youth, get that off the ground in conjunction with our zoo, and doing a lot of different things that we have done as a result of our participation. So we started to generate all of that. We saw you had a staff, I wanted a staff. So I went back and said, I want a staff. I want to put a staff. So,
you got to propose it with some hearts.
Hearts. No. I actually had to go in and fight for the money. I'm like, you're not getting a fire truck. I'm getting a staff. So that's what happened. They wanted a fire truck. And I said, you can get that somewhere else. We need staff. And they have a lot of fire trucks. Don't think I'm like keeping our city, Trust me, the fire department got a lot of money. So just trying to allocate some resources to do this, to make this a reality and to push it forward. But it really was the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights that sealed the deal for the money for the Nature Center. And I'll tell you why. So I proposed the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights to be on the docket for City Council. City Council president calls me and goes, what is this? And I said, it's the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. She was like, you want this to be a law? I said, yes, I do. And she's like, why? I said, can you just do it? And she was giving me a hard time. So I just made it known that the children would be presenting it. So the children went to City Council, and the children presented. They made a video. They presented the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. And I was watching them like, who's going to say no? Go ahead, say no to the kids. Go ahead, tell the kids no. And they're all looking at me like, we can't tell the kids no. We don't know why we're doing this, but we do. But I knew why they were doing it. And the reason I had them do that is because now they can be held accountable for the rest of time to making sure that there's money to support that policy, that there's programs, that each and every year, no matter who sits in that commissioner's seat and goes begging for money every year, they have a law to point to in city code that says that our children have a right to these things. And I guarantee you, our children have a right to these things. And I guarantee you no politician is going to undo that. And so I will tell you that, the secret sauce, the secret recipe was having all of the commitment, but also then, really pushing on, as Sarah stood up here and said earlier, the leadership. I had a mayor who was the first woman mayor in our city who had campaigned on her commitment to children. And then you had a commissioner that doesn't take no for an answer. We've already established that. And who shamelessly reminded the mayor of what she promised in her campaigns every meeting I needed to about the commitment to children. So my approach was more about creating a sense of urgency, because Phil has also told you that things in the cities move very slowly. And so creating a sense of urgency, because administrations change and can do all of those things. But once the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights, we were going to hold the press conference. And the mayor looked at me, and we had it at the site that would be the Nature Center. Very strategic, y'all. I had the drawings all up everywhere. I was like, ooh, what's that? And I said, well, that's what it could be if we get some money. Lots of millions and tens of millions of dollars. And the mayor looked at me and said, okay. So then she gets to the mic, and we announce to the press the Outdoor Bill of Rights, and she says, we're going to fund that. And so, we're going to fund that. And so, as a part of the next capital budget, the Nature Center was put in the capital budget. In full, moved up front, in front of all the projects. The library was staring at me. Everybody was staring at me. I was like, sorry. And doing it for the kids. It's for the kids. And that's how you get stuff done. That's how you get stuff done fast in the city. So that's what I wanted to share about how we did so much so quickly. Teamwork, dream work, just making that vision a reality, accepting the challenges, working around them. You can do that too. I hope you leave here inspired to do all the things?
So Danielle, you've now given me PTSD of my time in city government. So before coming to the National League of Cities, I was the chief administrative officer for the city of Jackson, Mississippi. And so I was the one in all of those city council meetings with all of the commission looking at me saying, how are we what are you talking about? And I say that in framing of this last question. Each of you have described in your own way a transition of what I like to call nice to necessary. When we talk about equitable access to nature and equitable access, period, often it's a conversation of that would be nice, and we need to have a conversation about why it is necessary. In Jackson, I had this experience when we were pre-pandemic. We were talking about access to broadband services in the city, and over 40% of the city had very little to no connection to broadband. And then the pandemic hit, and we were taking the entire school district virtual, and almost half the children in the city had zero to very little access. And the conversation shifted from nice to necessary in a hurry. In the context today, when we're looking at resources in communities, the ways that we're thinking about how we're trying to transform equitable access to nature for our communities, I want to know what's next. What's next for each of you in your story that you want to talk about, how you want to be able to transform that conversation in your community from nice to necessary, and what does it look like? Anyone jump in first? And then Freddie goes to the mic.
The nice to necessary thing is probably the core philosophy for anyone who works in parks or works with children, right? I mean, Sarah, you said this. It's amazing how we're all using the same lexicon, and the pandemic has, helped other people understand it. But we're all parkies, and we all love kids, and we already understand the connection between how important nature is to kids. But I say all the time in San Francisco that parks are not just sweet amenities. I mean, I love a good bounce house, but but parks are not just nice to haves. They're not just amenities. Parks are actually utilities. They're must-haves and they're utilities. They're not nice-to-haves, they're must-haves. They're not amenities, they're utilities. They provide hard infrastructure, and more importantly for this conversation, they provide social infrastructure. Maybe they're equally important. And I think creating that sense of urgency, it's also the toughest work that we do, right? Every elected official loves to go to a ribbon cutting. Yeah. But parks and kids remain among the lowest funded silos in government. We oversee nearly 20% of the city's land, and we do it on less than 1.5% of the city's general fund. I mean, it's remarkable that we're still standing. And so urgency is important. And so as we look forward, I think you talked about the pandemic, Robert. I think we cannot kind of waste this moment, and we are still in it. There's been a couple of moments in the last 5 or 6 years. There's been, a racial reckoning moment with Floyd, and people are saying, starting to understand the importance, what equity means, what diversity and inclusion and belonging mean, and then the link between parks and nature and the mental health of us all, but particularly our children, have become much more crystallized even among people out that are not smart enough to be here today. And so it is our jobs to continue to remind folks of how important it was that nature was around during the pandemic, that parks were open during the pandemic, that we had safe spaces, community hubs and learning hubs for our kids to go to when a lot of school districts shut down during the pandemic. We need to seize that moment and and I'm definitely putting Danielle in a consulting agreement to come out to San Francisco and hold our elected officials' feet to the fire.
They might cry.
They might cry. I hope they cry. Some of them. But hold our electeds to the fire and not let this moment go. We are in a mental health crisis for our kids right now, right? Between the pandemic, you know, Jesus alluded to it, between all the mishigas happening around the world, that is just truly awful. Between, you know, these things and the devices that our kids are on constantly, our kids are, you know, many of our kids are lonely, and they are grappling with a variety of anxieties, you know, related to you know, sort of their sanity, and there's an antidote right in front of us, and that is urgent. So without you know, a super specific policy initiative, I would say more, louder, more and louder.
Yeah, and just to feed off of that, we're thinking about equitable access to spaces, to green spaces, so everyone can feel safe and welcome into these green spaces. And when I think about it, I think that there's a nice to urgency component where, we want the community to come into these spaces. We want our black and brown kids to come into these spaces and feel safe in these spaces. And how do we do that? Well, we have folks in leadership and environmental educators or park rangers or, heads of parks that represent them, that look like them, that come to their community. And how do we do that? We get more young adults of color into these positions. And I'm getting excited. We get these folks, and so they have representation. So when you have representation, you feel safer. You can then get these folks coming into the parks. You can then get the funding and the recognition that we need more funding for parks because everyone is going to the parks because everyone feels safe at these parks, right? So I think it is now a time to embrace, to embrace this idea and open up these barriers and open up these doors for our youth into jobs, and not just jobs, but just experiences and opportunities. And being into these rooms and understanding how people work to get a nature center in a lower income part of the city, or work to get staff to then implement these community initiatives. Like how, a lot of our young adults don't know how that even actually works, or don't know that they can actually be that person to make that happen, right? So now is the time to open up these doors and allow these access and these opportunities. And yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you. When you talk about the story, what's the next story? I always think about, in my city, all our stories about children are sad ones. Data upon data about failing schools, trauma, poverty, systemic racism, and mostly about adults unwilling to fix the problems. It's just sad upon sad. And so when I talk about connecting children to nature, I talk about hope. I talk about joy. I talk about healing, health, learning, and fellowship. I found myself talking about families and neighbors and friends and neighborhoods in different ways than when we talk about the story of our children and the state of them in other places and spaces. I left here energized with talking about it from the perspective of what could be and what it should be and what it felt like. You just felt the sun when you talked about it and smiled. You saw the stars. You saw the outdoors. The water. We live on a great lake and with a river. And, most of our kids don't even go to those things. And so just leaving and thinking about it from that perspective, starting from and with creating equity and access for children with nature, is something that everyone could see themselves doing. And that's why it was easy to get people to come to the table, because they could see it. And that's the story that I like to tell about it. You know, because honestly, it's an easier problem to solve than the ones I said before. When we come to the tables and we sit and we talk about poverty, and we talk about, right, systemic racism, we're all like, man, who's going to tackle that one today? But when we talk about connecting children to nature, that's something that's accessible to us as leaders and as community members to make a reality. And then little do we know, we're chipping away at the bigger issue. And it's something we can put into action right away so children can benefit from without waiting for studies or evaluations or pilots. Don't we all like to do all that? The study, we have to do a study and evaluate. Something we could do right away. And it was a big win for our city and our children. And I'm a professional advocate, if you can't tell. And I spend most of my time spouting data about what we do to our children in this world, data that could bring you to tears. But I'd much rather talk about what works. I'd much rather talk about connecting children to nature and doing more of that in every system that touches the lives of all the children and their families. We'll all be better for it. We'll all be better for it. And maybe, just maybe, it'll keep us all motivated also to keep working on those harder problems that we are overwhelmed by in cities everywhere. Thank you.
Beautiful. If you're anything like me, you have a million questions right now, and you would love to pose them to the panel, but we only have 10 minutes for it. So we have 2 microphones up front. I want to encourage you to come up and have a quick question for the panel. Please, questions from the audience.
I don't have a question.
Oh, I thought these were the question askers. These are the Phil Donahues. Okay.
Flag us down.
All right. Question over here.
Yeah, all right.
Yes, please.
Hey, party people. I guess this question is for Danielle, but anybody who has advice about taking our Baltimore Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights, towards being more enforceable.
Oh, was it adopted by City Council?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Well, your budget process. Get involved. Like, there's a process. Every city has one. It's usually not accessible except for the, commissioners who are tortured and have to go in there and do it. But make that a part of your process, because there is a community and public input part to the budget process. And that is overlooked very often, but it's a strategy. So get public involvement in the budget development process, where they have town halls, they have ways that they're collecting data for the budget process. Get groups that you work with to be a part of bringing that forward and highlighting that this is a code, it's in your law, you already adopted these, and asking the City Council how they are going to ensure that that Bill of Rights is upheld in the budget process. How will they ensure that? Get the community involved, get involved in the budget process. That's how you're going to do it.
So these things are, I don't know exactly where it sits in Rochester's municipal codes, but these things tend to be, they're resolutions, right? Yeah. So they're not really law, to be honest. They're resolutions. Well, I want to hear more about that. But what you can do, and particularly if you are in the nonprofit and non-governmental sector, is why don't you form a group that evaluates how the city is doing against the goals articulated in the Bill of Rights, right? So you have to keep it alive, and the way to keep it alive is maybe some sort of annual scorecard. Obviously, there are ways to refer back to the document during budget advocacy, but I think it's very important that once you go through the, what is a collaborative process and sort of drafting and explaining why this is important to the elected officials, and you get something passed, and whether it be by ordinance or by resolution or a voter initiative or whatever, then you actually need to keep it alive. And there's a lot of ways. There's a ton of smart people in the room, but don't just let it sit on the shelf, because people will forget about it. City council members come and go, members of the board of supervisors come and go, mayors come and go, parks directors come and go.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, keep it alive.
Great. Question on this side of the room?
I'd like to hear a little bit about, I hear a lot about children and youth, but I'd really like to know what cities are doing around babies and mommies and poppies and grandmas and granddads, and really engaging with infants and toddlers and very young children, because we know that's a real big opportunity time.
I mean, I think actually that a decision that was made by our collaborative was to focus on that exact population first, that we felt like that was where some of the biggest need and the biggest equity gaps existed. So, I mean, I think we can sort of, it depends on how we define baby, but, we start trying to focus on kids at age 2, and that's in the sort of the preschool type, sort of the beginning of the sort of preschool cycle. So we're doing a lot of work with 2 to 5 year olds, and again, the strategy there is collaborating with early childhood educators. Most cities and counties, or most counties certainly, have an office of early childhood education, or some sort of agency that focuses on kids of this, the 0 to 5 population. So working with early childhood educators, helping to train them in how to use nature to improve social, emotional, and cognitive development at that age, and then giving them the tools. Before we started redoing the backyards of Tiny Tot, home-based Tiny Tot programs, we brought them nature in a box, something really simple. We just, put some branches and some rocks and leaves and just natural materials in a box, and where they could just take it out and the kids could play with it. But it's a really important age, in part because, as I said, it's actually, that's an age where we need to think about strategies to bring nature to kids, rather than creating the expectation that kids will come to nature.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, is there a question in the back?
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Hi, I have one of those tiny babies on my lap, so I'm going to try to be real quiet because she is asleep. Sorry, I'm back here. So I live in Omaha, Nebraska. Well, I mostly live in Omaha, Nebraska, but we actually live in a tiny little town that is surrounded by Omaha. And I'm curious, as we try to look at having Omaha become a nature everywhere city in the future, how did any of you guys incorporate in some of your suburbs into this work? What does that look like from a governmental perspective? If it's just your main city, or if you included smaller suburbs in these conversations.
Maybe that's Robert's sort of big, audacious, urgent future goal. But I mean, I think you have to start someplace. And I mean, all of us work, sort of in cities. So we have, and we just did a quick poll here. I don't think any of us have sort of, moved our work into the suburbs. But how many cities are we up to, Sarah? Huh? 70, right? So the more of us that do this, then then our neighbors will start to try to catch on. But I would say start small and not big. This is a hard thing, and you got to move slowly. And so I would not have started with all 8 million Bay Area residents. It's just too audacious.
I would also give the example of one of our partners, Dearborn, Michigan. This is not specifically in this initiative, but they were thinking about connecting greenways in their communities. And so they knew that the partnering community contiguous to them, one of their suburbs, actually had a greenway that it was already established. And so when they actually brought on some funding to actually build on a project, they intentionally connected into what was already existing and used that as a way to be able to both collaborate across jurisdictions, but to also build on the assets that they already had in their communities. So when you start to think about partnering across community lines, it's often thinking about how you can share assets in ways that are going to support both communities in ways that could advance the outcomes that you want to see. So, yes.
So I, most of my work is in Houston, but this is for you, Ashleigh. Most of my work is in Houston, but I live in the Texas Hill Country, just outside of Austin. And when I tell people, when I mention Houston, people are like, oh, Houston has problems. And then I mention Austin, they're like, Austin's so great. You must love living there. It's the most amazing. There's like this concept. And I remember Lester Holt from MSNBC came to Austin, and he was interviewing people. And at the time that this was happening, Austin was selling off a chunk of green space from a poor community in order to buy more green space in a more affluent community. And Lester Holt is interviewing people, and he interviews these two white people, and he says, why did y'all move to Austin? Why are y'all here? And they said, we love how inclusive Austin is and how equitable it is. And I was just like screaming at my TV. And I'm wondering, do you actually see challenges in even getting people to recognize that Austin has equity issues in the park space?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even myself moving to Austin from New York and understanding how equity looks very different in Austin, but in Texas in general. And, you know, purveying that sense to community and showing folks, you know, you can show folks through maps and pictures and data that is there, but really what you need to show folks is personal experiences and journeys and stories of people who live in Austin and how Austin has changed and their personal experience to the parks spaces in the city. And you know, we find doing that, you know, that personal journey, that story, whether it be from, you know, our young adults or older adults who've been there so much longer, to communities to show that example. You know, I had to learn a whole new region and like how things worked. So I definitely see the work that needs to be done in Austin to show folks, you know, where the inequities land and where they lie. And I see you, Jen.
Great. We have time for one last question in the back. And for those that didn't get your questions asked, please come up afterwards and talk to the panel.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inspiring all of us. And so my question leans a different way. This work is amazing. The collaborations are amazing. Has there been any thought to bringing any corporate partners into this space with their funds? And then also just knowing that sometimes they can be working at cross purposes to our work. Many have sustainability, and I'm from Michigan, so I think particularly of a situation where public lands were sold to a private entity and turned into a golf course and taken from the community. So how can we try to head off some of those initiatives?
Well, in terms of corporate, you know, we had thought about how to incorporate corporate support from a fundraising standpoint, but also, you know, partnership and what they could get out of the partnership. So it's really about presenting them the opportunity to be a part of making a difference in your community. And so I started to think about corporations that had, you know, had a stake in that game. You know, for us, we have a very large food chain that's headquartered in our city. So thinking about, well, how can, you know, their, you know, the health and well-being, you know, lean of this Is this something that they can partner with and feel good about? And also, we'll feel good about their money. You know, it's a two-way feel-good situation. And it brings what we're trying to do into reality. So I definitely think there's a space for corporate partnerships. I think they have to be vetted for intentionality and purpose and, you know, what people are trying to get out of it. So I think you have to think about that. And, you know, your parkland question's a big one, because that happens a lot when people are looking at land and property. And our cities all accidentally give away land all the time. Accidentally, right? It happens. You have to think about that as a little bit separate, and maybe our parks guy will chime in about that.
Sure. I was going to focus a little bit more on funding as well, which is that I think that one of the challenges that we didn't talk a lot about is actually, where does the money come from to do all this work, right? And sure, government can bring resources to the game, and then you build a collaborative with 30 or 40 partners. You know, you have to sort of think through what are the financial resources, whether, you know, sort of in-kind or direct resources that your partners are committing, and then what is the strategy to augment the resources that you have available with additional resources to do things. So whether it's, foundations, but there are plenty of mission-aligned sort of private sector partners that understand the importance of this work. We had an interesting conversation at dinner last night about hospital networks. And the fact that hospital networks actually have a financial incentive to make sure that when someone leaves a hospital, they actually stay out of the hospital for a certain period of time. And we all know that being in nature not just improves mental health, it improves mental health outcomes and physical health outcomes. So I have found that hospital networks are actually, and in each of our cities, we have sort of anchor, either anchor businesses or anchor industries that, do believe in, do have some level of sense of corporate responsibility and want to, whether it's for public relations or it's because they really care, want to invest back in the community in which, in which they have a significant presence. And, again, with vetting, there's a lot of hustle to this, right? Because this isn't a silo that is directly funded by anyone, with the exception of some, really prescient, institutional foundations that have absorbed nature, youth nature access and mental health and things like that into, their giving priorities. But, it's not yet at the point where it's an obvious, silo of funding for government. And, I've never met a nonprofit that wasn't scraping to get by. And so the funding piece is a challenge, so creativity is encouraged.
Wonderful. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Daniele Lyman-Torres, Ashleigh Cibelli-Pettus, and Phil Ginsburg.